countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It was the world's strangest accident. While testing a new rocket ship, our heroes were bombarded by mysterious cosmic rays from outer space. Though they crash-landed safely, the strange and powerful rays had changed each one of them, transforming the host with the most into the plastic-skinned Mr. Fantastic. J.A. into a now you see him, now you don't, Invisible Man. And Chad Smith into a mighty muscle powerhouse called The Thing. Now, together with Herbie the Robot, Herbie the Sound Effect Machine, the newest member of the group, they have become the greatest team of superheroes the world has ever known. The new Fantastic Four.
Yes! Here's the last comic shop. I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. Thanks so much to our co-host, J.A. Scott, for gracing us with a rendition of the new Fantastic Four opening, that cartoon that was released in 1978, written by Stan Lee. Jack Kirby actually did some of the designs for that show. So it was kind of like the first time that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had worked together on a project involving the Fantastic Four since they split ways way back in the late 60s. So that's really cool. And the reason why we're talking about that today is because we're going to be reviewing a Fantastic Four book. We're going to be reviewing the recently wrapped up series Fantastic Four Life Story, written by Mark Russell, who is our other co-host, Chad Smith. It's one of his favorite comic book writers. So he's been really excited to finally do another Mark Russell book on this show. So,
your ever-loving blue-eyed Chad has been pushing Mark Russell for a long time, and then this is what I get.
You had your pick of any Mark Russell book. Why this one, Chad?
You said you wanted a Marvel book. One of my requirements, and I don't know how much Mark Russell's putting out for Marvel recently. He's a little bit all over the place. He's doing right now currently the One Star Squadron over at DC. He's got Dead Box coming out through Vault.
Another one that just recently wrapped up, Not All Robots.
That one's tons of fun. Heck, he even has My Bad coming out from Ahoy, and so dude is all over the place in all these different companies, but we needed a Marvel one, so here we go.
It's actually the first Marvel book we've covered here in 2021. I know we've been hitting DC very hard recently, and again, we've had some indie books, but this is the first Marvel book for this year. So it'll be good to reconnect with our Marvel roots. As you might know, I'm a huge fan of Marvels, and I'm also a huge fan of the Fantastic Four, so it was really nice to revisit some of my childhood heroes. But one other thing we're going to revisit on today's program is a lot of our weekly polls. As you may or may not know, but hopefully you do, every Wednesday over at the Last Comic Shop, at Last Comic Shop on Twitter, our co-host J.A. Scott is nice enough to put out a weekly poll for all of our fans to vote on. Traditionally, it has to do with the comic book we're reviewing that week, and periodically, we like to come on this show and recap the results. We just did this last week, because we hadn't done it in almost like 2 months. So I thought it was going to be another opportunity to just kind of really catch up and get as many more done as we can this week. So, J.A., you've got 5 poll results for us on this week's show?
That is correct. We have 5 more poll results, so that should take us right up to the time that we recorded this podcast. So the first one is accepting that Christopher Reeve is the best. Who is the second best Superman actor?
This was about the time that we reviewed Superman, Son of Kal-El. So if you want to listen to that show. And what were the choices for that poll, J.A.?
Well, we had Henry Cavill, Brandon Routh, who was in Superman Returns, Tom Welling, who's the Superman from Smallville, and George Reeves.
From the Adventures of Superman way back in the 50s.
And I Love Lucy.
There is that awesome I Love Lucy episode. Chad, real quickly, who did you vote for in this poll?
I Love Lucy. So, I went with George Reeves.
Very good. J.A., who was your pick?
I went with the eventual winner, Henry Cavill.
Oh, Henry Cavill did win by a landslide. I don't think it was close even, right?
No. Brandon Routh, Tom Welling, and George Reeves all got between 10 and 20%, and Henry Cavill took it with over 56% of the vote. I thought Brendan Routh was good if he's an actor trying to be Christopher Reeve. He wasn't really playing Superman. He was more playing Christopher Reeve playing Superman.
No, for me, unfortunately, Henry Cavill is the Andrew Garfield of Superman, where, like, I think he's a great actor. It just doesn't have a lot to work with in his movies, though.
Slamming all those Snyder fans. Oh, I voted for Brandon Routh. I won't lie. I really did enjoy him on all the Crisis of Infinite Earth stuff that they did on the CW shows, where they brought him back as kind of like the quote-unquote kingdom come elder statesman Superman. I just thought that stuff was neat. And again, to Chad's point, it's kind of redeemed him by giving him good material to work with. You got to see him as a pretty good actor. Superman Returns had a lot of problems. I don't think it was actually him. But anyways, what was our second poll, J.A.?
So this was in the midst of our big DC run, and this came out for when we were looking at Crisis. So if you had to remove one DC Universe character from the DC Universe forever, who would it be? Like, who doesn't belong in the DC Universe, or who could you live without in the DC Universe? Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, or Green Lantern?
All right, Chad, who did you pick?
This is a tough one because how do you pick who you can live without? So I'll say Wonder Woman. Just because she should be an actual mythological thing all to herself. She should have been in my history books and my Edith Wharton mythologies. She doesn't belong in the DCU.
Yeah, I actually went with Wonder Woman too, but for a different reason. I've often talked about if there's characters that you could move from DC into Marvel, who would they be? And I felt like Wonder Woman would be a perfect addition to the Marvel universe. I think they could do a lot more with her because they really don't have a character like that in Marvel. It's like her and Superman. They just don't have characters that work as well. They've been trying to do a little bit with Captain Marvel and trying to make her more of the Wonder Woman of the Marvel universe, but it doesn't work as well. I would like to see Wonder Woman take the spotlight there. So who was your pick, J.A.?
Well, I went with the Green Lantern, who was the eventual winner, simply because I just don't... and somebody point me in the direction of a good Green Lantern book that I can get into, because his power set is stupid. The whole Green Lantern Corps is stupid. The whole idea of it is stupid. It's a golden age comic where a kid finds a ring in a packet of Cracker Jacks and becomes a superhero thing that, I don't know. I don't want to bag on it too much.
What if a lot of other people did bag on it? You said it was the winner of this poll. How much did it win by?
35% to Green Lantern, 30% to Flash. I figure that is because Flash already kind of didn't exist a couple of times. They killed him off, or they had different Flashes step in. Wonder Woman got the least amount of votes. Everyone likes Wonder Woman. They want to see her around. Superman around 22. No Batman, because I think Batman would have skewed everything, because Batman essentially exists within his own universe anyways within DC.
I am totally on the same page with you on that. I'm so glad that you didn't put Batman on this poll, because I think he would have ran away with it. It wouldn't have been a poll. Because you're right. Batman exists in his own universe anyways. So
I would argue, at least publishing-wise, the DC universe exists in the Batman universe. It's a subset of Batman as opposed to the other way around.
There you go. It was interesting, though. A lot of people came out with this poll saying, like, well, who are we actually getting rid of? Like, when you talk about Green Lantern, like, which actual Green Lantern are we getting rid of? And I said, all of them.
Yes, all of them.
All right. So what was poll number 3?
So this came out with Jimmy Olsen. Who is the best comic book journalist? Is it April O'Neil from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Is it Ben Urich of Daredevil and Marvel fame? Is it Iris West? Or the eventual winner, this should go without saying, Lois Lane, who won with 46% of the vote. So
wow, that much.
April O'Neil and Ben Urich kind of split their vote. Iris West, she got like 3%, so one person probably thought she was good.
Oh, no love for Iris. I know I voted for Ben Urich. You know, he's part of Born Again. He's part of a lot of the Spider-Man good stories. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I've read more Ben Urich stories that were really good versus Lois Lane stories. Chad, what did you think?
While I agree that I've read more good Ben Urich stories, nothing beats Lois Lane with that whip-cracking 1940s-esque snappy dialogue. And anytime you can do Lois in that style, I'm for it. And so Lois got my vote.
All right. What was poll number 4, J.A.?
Best year that is a title of a film.
And this was with 1984, right? We reviewed 1984, the comic book adaptation of that legendary novel on that week. So what were the choices?
2001, 2012, 1941, or 1917.
I love the fact with this poll, too, that you named the director right after it. So it was like, just in case you didn't know who directed 1941, that was Steven Spielberg. That was my vote, because I really love John Belushi in that. And they got the AT-AT gun and like that. It's just a great movie. And I needed to vote for something other than 2001. I knew that was going to run away with it. So I was standing up against HAL 9000. I was like,
Pretty sure 2001's the only one of those I've seen all the way through, even though I may not have understood it.
You didn't see that 2012?
Is that the one with the ice wolves?
no, that was Day After Tomorrow.
No, 2012. That's with John Cusack, where they fly around in the big Russian/Ukrainian airplane.
Is this the boombox?
I think you lost me at Giant Airplane. I was surprised, though, that not a lot of people voted for 1917, because that's fairly recent. It's actually a really good movie. I think that there was a lot of people that said, like, hey, if you hadn't put 2001 on here, we would have voted for 1917.
Was that the Andrew Garfield one?
No.
That's Hacksaw Ridge. Ah! I got that at this game.
Wrong war.
Anyways, last poll, J.A. What was the last poll here?
Best Watchmen spin-off. Before Watchmen, Doomsday Clock, the Watchmen HBO series, or Rorschach.
You know what would have been great for this poll was like the Zack Snyder movie, Watchmen. Because I think that's even a spin-off. Because that doesn't even really follow the book. It does in some ways.
What?
The end is completely different.
Yeah, but everything else is totally the same. That's the movie that taught me that following the comic book accurate script is not a way to make a good movie.
Like that whole scene at the beginning of the movie where the Minutemen, they introduce all the Minutemen. And it's like To Times They Are A-Changin' by Bob Dylan. They just looped it so because they had to get through all the scenes. I'm just like, he didn't write a 6-minute song. It's terrible. But anyways, what did win, J.A.?
The HBO series in a landslide, 75% of the vote.
Wow. I did not vote for that. I think I said publicly that, hey, I'm always going to go for comic books over comic book related media. So, like, I voted for Rorschach because of the 3 comic books out there. That was my favorite. What did you vote for, J.A.?
I voted for the HBO series. I thought it was the most timely and the best written.
I had only seen 1 episode of the HBO series, but I voted for that because it was not only informative. I didn't know about the Tulsa riots. Like, I learned something, and it was super intense, and I fully intend to go back and watch the full show eventually. But that one affected me, so that one wins.
All right. Well, that is a wrap-up of all of our polls. We didn't get to 5,000 kilometers per second, but that'll be on a future show. So make sure that you continue to tune into The Last Comic Shop, as well as our Twitter page, @LastComicShop, for these weekly polls every Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, sometimes even Friday. Just be paying attention to our Twitter polls. We'll try to get them out there as close to Wednesday and New Comic Book Day as possible. But right after these messages, we'll be right back with our review of Fantastic Four Life Story. We guarantee it will be fantastic.
Hello everyone, my name is Dominic and I want to tell you about the Comic Book Report. It's my YouTube channel where I review, unbox, discuss all things comic collected editions. I review so you can get an idea of what to read. So stop on by and tune in to the Comic Book Report, only on YouTube. You can also find some of my promotional accounts on Instagram @The Comic Book Report and on Twitter @ComicBookRPT. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, have a good one.
Hi folks, this is Sean, Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast. If you enjoy genuine conversation from two guys who love the subjects that they're talking about. You need to check us out. Just search Pittsburgh Nerd on some of your favorite podcast catching apps, or you can also check out our vlog on YouTube. Just search Pittsburgh Nerd. We're really, really easy to find.
Okay, and we are back. It's time now for the Read Pile review, and this week we are reviewing Fantastic Four Life Story. And Chad, who brought us this wonderful six-issue? Well, I don't know about wonderful. Who brought us this six-issue run?
So it was written throughout by Mark Russell. Sean Izaakse did the majority of the art. Nolan Woodward was color artist throughout, and Joe Caramagna did letters. And then on issue 4, we had artists by Francesco Mana. Issue 5 was Carlos Mango. And issue 6, we had artists by Z. Carlos and Angel Unzeta.
Okay,
Yeah.
So J.A. Scott has some feelings about this particular book this week, so we're going to let him kind of start with some of his feelings during the 10-cent synopsis. So, J.A., what happens in Fantastic Four Life Story?
Now, this kind of exists in a world of, they've done this before with Spider-Man, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the idea of Fantastic Four Life Story is that you are getting the story of the Fantastic Four across the decades as if they had aged in real time, not aging comic book time. So it starts in the 60s when they get their powers, and then each issue is essentially a decade. So issue 1 is the 60s, issue 2 is the 70s, issue 3 is the 80s, issue 4 is the 90s, issue 5 is the aughts, issue 6 brings you pretty much up to present day. The whole sort of overarching story, well, at least for the first 5 issues, is kind of like Galactus is coming, and the Fantastic Four need to get ready for Galactus to be coming. Galactus finally shows up in issue 5, and then they realize that they still got another issue to put out, so they have to make Doctor Doom come back and be a bad guy for issue 6, so there's another something to fight against. There's not a lot of action. It's just a lot of them getting ready for Galactus. That's essentially what it is. Namor comes in for a bit and steals Sue Richards away from Reed. Franklin grows up, but it's a 6-issue run of Fantastic Four that has 1 issue's worth of action.
You do get a space punch.
You do get a space punch, but no Herbie the Robot. So if you were into Herbie the Robot, sorry.
Wow. So again, as I said, J.A. had some real feelings about this week's book. I didn't honestly think it was that bad. It's not the best Mark Russell book I've ever read. I will say that the hype around this, I think, was a little bit more for me, just because I had such a good experience with the last life story I read, which was Spider-Man's life story, done by Chip Zdarsky with art by Mark Bagley. Despite the fact that I thought they should have used different artists for different issues, I really enjoyed that because it really allowed Peter Parker to age from one decade to another. And I think that's why that series works better, because Spider-Man is not a character that is allowed to age. He's not. So to see the actual character get into his 40s, his 50s, his 60s, all the way up to his 80s, that's something for Spider-Man. With the Fantastic Four, especially Reed and Sue, they actually already are aged up in comic books. They start off as being single people. They get married. They have kids. Those events in any sort of fictional narrative do age up characters. It happens in soap operas. It happens in comics. The moment people get married, have kids, they start moving on with their age and their story. So, like, it's nothing new. Plus the fact that this was already kind of sort of done in Fantastic Four Grand Design. Right, Chad?
Well, there are parts of it. And see, this is where I really like the idea behind these life story books, where each book gets to be a decade. And I had a few more issues with Spider-Man Life Story than you did, Andy, where I just feel like they're dropping the ball in each of these things. Whether it was in Spider-Man Life Story, like Mark Bagley is a fantastic artist, but he's not someone that is good at showing the passage of time or different fashions or exploring how the world is changing. In this, I thought the only character that actually ages in this book is Franklin, which that poor guy was stuck in that 4.5 t-shirt for how many decades in real lifetime. But it's 4 issues in before Sue looks like she's aged a day. Reed Richards, and They do have that scene where they explain it via his powers.
Yeah, that was like I think my favorite segment of the entire series. With just this moment where like Reed is got to be like in his late 50s, early 60s. He's laying in bed. He wakes up. He's an old man, and he uses his stretching powers to basically turn himself back into the Reed Richards that we all know.
It's Reed Richards Botox.
Exactly.
I thought it was the most interesting use of Reed's real powers I'd seen in a comic book in like decades.
I can see that, and that part was neat. But like I said, I was disappointed because it took less advantage of telling the story from each decade as much as it was just another Mark Russell thought experiment. Trust me, I'm a huge Mark Russell fan. Sometimes that really works. In here, I don't know that it did, because in the changes that they made, a lot of the changes we had already seen, like in Grand Design, whenever Sue marries Namor, and they take a lot of those what-if elements. Here, when it happens, like, oh, that would be really interesting if I didn't just see it a year ago. And then they end up neutering Reed's relationships and all the other things that would ground him to the other characters. Like, his relationship with Dr. Doom is not what it should be. His relationship with Ben Grimm is not what it should be.
Yeah.
This is his take on Reed Richards as a well-intentioned bad guy, which is great. But we saw Brian Bendis do Reed Richards as a well-intentioned bad guy in the Ultimate Universe. Like, we've seen it enough that it just didn't bring anything exciting to the table, I guess.
And that's sort of the problem I had. I thought it was just overindulgence. It's like if you didn't like the Zack Snyder Justice League and now you get 6 hours of the Zack Snyder Justice League. Maybe people have some issues with some of the changes they make, like changes to Galactus, changes to the Silver Surfer, changed. But my biggest takeaway is like, okay, those changes, it's just this writer, having his thing. But all the exposition, there is no action within. I think Reed Richards, he changes his face around and he reaches across the room to grab something off a shelf. And that's like the extent that you see him use his fantastic power for 6 issues.
Well, that's because in this book, he's not Mr. Fantastic. He's Mr. Fanatic. He just becomes a nutbag for Galactus's company.
Yeah. And one of the things I think I want to touch upon is when you brought up his relationship with some of these characters, you're right. Like, I had a real big problem with him and Ben Grimm meeting right before they take off in the spaceship. Like, that really bothered me for some reason, because even though they eventually got that dynamic of Reed and Ben, like and Ben became what we consider traditional Ben, without the backstory of them being college roommates and, Ben sticking up for Reed in the face of Doom even before they got powers, like, you lose track of like why Ben Grimm would give a shit about any of these people and why he wouldn't just like murder Reed the moment he became a grotesque monster. I recently watched the Fantastic Four movie that they originally released from Fox with my kid. And there's a couple things that movie does right. And one of them is the fact that Michael Chiklis is sticking up for the Reed Richards character well before they ever get their powers. They're like, he's the heavy. He's like, don't mess with Reed or you got to mess with me. So Doom sees Ben as the unofficial bodyguard long before he becomes this rocky, hulking powerhouse. You need that, and you don't get that. Look, that first whole issue, even though I loved this man, this monster stuff, and for a while there, I didn't know where that was going. Like, who's this scientist with the glasses? And I was like, oh, shit, they're doing this man, this monster, and that's awesome. You didn't have no reason for Ben to come back to the Fantastic Four other than he was a member of the Fantastic Four. Who cares?
He gets his moments, though. Ben gets to be a good guy. He gets to be the guy that after everything crumbles, comes back and it's like, hey, Reed, I'm moving in with you. And then becomes the roommate and like, oh, that was fun. And they get the moment where he's the pilot and finds out that they're bombing the children in the orphanages, and that's how he gets dishonorably discharged. Like, Ben is painted as the hero that we would want him to be here. And Sue, they do good things with Sue Storm where she becomes that feminist, where it happened off screen in the comics, where Sue Storm for the longest time wasn't allowed to do anything before eventually she became one of the most powerful members of the Fantastic Four. Here it's a little bit more spelled out and forthright with her coming into her own. But even things like Dr. Doom and their attempts to ground Dr. Doom, They make him less grandiose. They make him less fun. He becomes the embodiment of the guy that's smart enough to destroy everything, and he's dumb enough to do it. Like, they never paint Doom as Reed's equal or, any sort of intellectual force. He's just a rote bad guy.
What I hated about Doom was after he was defeated in the end, he's like, okay, you beat me, so I'm just going to put my Doom bots on suicide patrol, and they're going to go out and blow up everything, because if I can't have it, no one can. I was like, when did Doom become this petulant little child that wants to take his toys and go home?
Yeah, that's not a very Doom-esque thing, I think.
To go back to sort of the Reed is the dick, evil guy, I mean, they captured that in like 1 or 2 panels of that X-Men Fantastic Four crossover we did a while back, where Reed is like, so I'm just going to make it so that you can't remember this.
Right, and he's always well-intentioned in his evil deeds, but Reed as a guy who's too focused to see what the right thing is not a new concept at play.
What I think my favorite parts of this, and there were some good parts to Chad's point, I like the fact, spoiler alert, they kill Human Torch like halfway through the book. He doesn't get it even out of the 80s, which is kind of fitting for him because he's the reckless young one, and what reckless young people never got out of the 80s because they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But he gets that kind of moment where he gets to really be a hero, and it's a testament to Mark Russell's really good writing in that issue because he uses the analogy of the party guest. That's like, you always want to be the one that leaves like an hour after the party starts because they're like, what's up with that guy? Why did he leave? You never want to be the guy that's stuck while people are still doing the dishes. And I was just like, yes, Mark Russell, even though this might have been an assignment for him, homework, whatever, there's still some moments of really good Mark Russell writing in this that really make you think. There's another one where like Reed has, beaten Galactus, but he's become basically a vegetable and he's living in his own mind. Mark Russell gives this quote. Again, not only talks about people that are in that situation, but just people that are just, suffer from anxiety or anything like that. And it's, the mind is a prison too, a dungeon where the jailer forgot to lock the door. So we close it for him. And I just thought that was super deep. I don't even know why. But it makes so much sense to me because, again, as somebody that's struggled with, anxiety and things like that, and you get caught in your own head, you're doing it yourself. You're closing the door. You're creating the own prison for you. Nobody locked you in there. It was yourself. It was just great stuff.
When you get a Mark Russell book, that's what you get with the cost of admission. And he definitely has those moments where I keep thinking, like, Jay is going to talk about the lack of action in this book. And that's definitely a valid point because there is no action in this book. But that's not what this book, in theory, I think is here for. It's more those explorations. And I think Russell was trying to explore, why do we need heroes? Is it the fact that heroes are saving humanity from itself and like they're actually part of the problem? Or is it the world itself will never heal itself until it has something to help it rise up and overcome? Ended up being the Mad Tinkerer's plan. Like that sort of social commentary, all that stuff is in here, and you get the thoughtful takes on the characters too. But I guess at the end of the day, my biggest issue isn't that there wasn't a lot of action. It was that there wasn't a lot of fun. The whole family aspect of the Fantastic Four is present, but not the warmth, not the stuff at the end of the day that you end up like, you read a Fantastic Four book and it's hard to find good ones. I'll be honest. There's probably a handful of writers right now that I think have written good Fantastic Four. But at the end of a good Fantastic Four story, you have that thing where you just kind of sit back and smile. And it's like, all right, things are going to be okay because all these people are together. And I'd never got that sense here.
Yeah, I mean, the whole devastation of a divorce or people moving out or separating is that they're moving away from that family unit and that warmth that they had. Well, in this book, you never got that sense. You never got the warmth to begin with, so that when Sue Richards leaves for Namor, you're like, oh, that's just a thing. Yeah. And you see a little bit with Franklin, being kind of angry at dad and angry at mom, but even that's a couple of panels. I just felt it was long. There was a lot of exposition. And again, I thought plotting-wise, I like that sort of plot device where you have Galactus discovers the Fantastic Four at the beginning because of the cosmic ray thing that turns them into the Fantastic Four. And then you just have Galactus is coming as this kind of drumbeat powering the series along. And I was like, oh, that's a really nice concept. But then at the end, it's like, oh, that only lasted 5 issues. We got to do a 6-issue run. So let's throw a Doctor Doom story that doesn't really relate to it on at the end. It was like they forgot that they had to do another issue, and they misplotted out the storyline.
I don't think they forgot so much as they didn't really service Doctor Doom well in the first 5 issues. And they're like, we have one of the greatest villains of all time. We should do something.
And that's the thing. Like, I've said it on this show so many times. Dr. Doom is one of my favorite characters of all time, and he was really given the short shrift out of anybody. That equal but opposite, the fact that, like, through a certain lens, Dr. Doom isn't exactly as bad as you might think he is. He's definitely the hero of his own story. Right. And so,
he's a complicated man.
Right. You go ahead and read Triumph and Torment, which I hope we cover when the Doctor Strange movie comes out. Like, in that book, Dr. Doom is a traditional hero. You don't get that here. I think the most interesting thing about it was his comments to Silver Surfer at one point where he's like, I'll make a deal with Galactus to turn the Earth into a grazing ground. And I was just like, that's interesting. Because that seems like a Doom thing to do. And even Silver's like, yeah, a lot of people have come to me, but that's actually an original idea. I like that. And I was going to ask J.A. about that. How big of a dick is Silver Surfer in this? And I'm sure that pissed you off.
Yeah, I didn't think they got the Silver Surfer character right at all. I liked how Galactus basically said, okay, I'm done with you. I'm going to give you the best thing I can do. You're dead. And he just turned him human in space.
Oh, poor Norrin Rad.
Yeah. But what I did like, is that he had been serving Galactus for like a millennia, right? Or something like that. So basically everyone he knew on Zenn-La was dead already, which I think works better too. The whole idea that Shala Bal was waiting for Norrin Rad to always go back to her meant that Galactus, only had Silver Surfer around for a little bit, or he gave her some of the cosmic power. I don't know. I like the idea that it takes longer for Galactus to move through areas of space. It makes space seem bigger. And as I said, that was my most favorite part of the book, was that setup where Galactus is coming and you can see him coming, but he's a long way away, and it's taking a long time to get here. And they have like a countdown clock. A literal doomsday clock.
And speaking of doomsday clocks and countdown clocks, the countdown clock to our rating is officially on. So stay tuned right after these commercial breaks, as we'll be back with that and recommendations for all of our fans.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Palatichuk. I'm an independent film director and screenwriter. I'm also an independent comic book artist and creator. I want to let you know about my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast. It's a weekly podcast where I interview other independent filmmakers and other artists from the Twin Cities area. You can find the show on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and Amazon Radio, as well as distributor Podbean. You can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So, if you're interested in how independent films get made or the process of filmmaking, also if you're interested in other artists' process and works as well, tune into my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, where it's not over till the guests say it's over.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our ratings, where we're always fantastic. But was Fantastic Four Life Story up to snuff? I don't know. Anyways, we got J.A. Scott. He always gives us an interesting 1 out of 4 scale for these things. I wonder if it's going to be Fantastic Four members, because there are 4 of those. But what's our rating scale for this week?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I actually had not thought of that 1 out of 4 Fantastic Four members. I almost want to do that, but I'm kind of married to my scale which I just came up with 5 minutes before you said that, I was going to go decades, because this is life story, so 1 out of 4 decades. How many decades is this worth? Do you spend 4 decades with the book? Do you want to spend 3 decades with the book? Do you want to spend less than a decade with the book?
All right. Well, we'll start off with Chad Smith, because technically this was his pick for this week, and I don't know is it going to be sacrilege for him to give Mark Russell a bad rating? We'll see. Chad, what do you think?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, there's so many other great Mark Russell stories out there. I love the Flintstones. I love Wonder Twins. There's better Mark Russell to be had. For me, this is more about the whole life story experiment. And to this point, between the Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four life stories, I don't know if either of them have been successful. This one dances in and out of some of the cultural touchstones. You get some of the mutual assured destruction in the 80s, and you get the feminist movement in the 70s. At the end of the day, I don't know if the Fantastic Four as a team or as a concept is one that works along a realistic time stream. Meaning, like Reed Richards, his intellect is so immeasurable. It doesn't track whenever you place it in the real world. Like, it just seems off. And that's how I felt throughout this series. I thought there were some fun ideas. I thought it was neat early on. They're like, oh, they're turning Reed into, this fanatic who's preparing for Galactus. I wonder how that's going to turn out. But at the end of the day, it lacked whatever it is that makes Fantastic Four worth being there in the first place. So I'm going to give it a 2.5 decades. I thought as far as comic books go, they were fine comic books. Yeah, it just didn't move me the way that it could have.
All right, J.A., how many decades you giving it?
As a thought experiment, I don't think it works. I think lower level, street level characters, when you try to put them in sort of real day events, seems to work better, because Spider-Man existed in our world. He wouldn't have as much of an effect on geopolitical machinations. So you can kind of understand him growing up in New York and interacting with the changes in society, but, not being able to prevent the Iran hostage situation, where if you've got Superman, you're like, well, why didn't you just fly in and take them out? And I think that's always sort of the struggle that you get with some of these comic books if they are trying to tie in too much real world history and real world events. Which is, I think, sort of what they got into with Watchmen, where they change world events because of the superheroes as an explanation of that. As I said, I did like the idea of Galactus taking time to come in, and how Earth and Reed is kind of undone and powers the whole idea of him through the first 5 issues. But again, it felt like it was just overindulgence on Marvel's part to tell a story that didn't necessarily need to be told. I mean, who is this written for? It's definitely not written for someone who's never read Fantastic Four before, because they'll hate it. And they won't understand a lot of it. It's like when you watch a superhero movie that's written by people that never knew the source material. And you're like, wow, they got every character kind of wrong there. Where did that come from? Wow! And maybe now I come off as sounding like I'm just this bitter old guy. Get off my lawn type, never touch my superheroes. It's sacrilegious. So I'm giving it 2. It's 2 decades. Dr. Doom was done a disservice. Why the Mad Tinker had to be so much? I mean, you've got Dr. Doom. Just write the story with Dr. Doom. Why do you have to have this whole Mad Tinker thing? And then, the whole plot device went back to the first issue where it's the head of Reed Richards who has the deactivation code. I was like, of all the MacGuffins they could have come up with, I mean, that was worse than the Ultimate Nullifier. It's just wow. So I'm giving it a 2.
You know what? If I was Mark Russell, I think a 2 would have been great from you, because I thought you were going way lower. I thought this was like a 1 or a 1.5.
Yeah, actually, you know what? You're right. It is. It's a 1.5.
Yeah, all right. I should just keep my mouth shut. I'm sorry. I got a lower rating out of this. Anyways, I can't give it lower than a 2, honestly. And I think I'll go a little bit higher. I think I'll be around the same as maybe Chad. I'll give it a 2.5 decades. I have read better Fantastic Four, And maybe if I hadn't read Fantastic Four Grand Design by Tom Scioli, which I think you should check out because it's only 2 issues and you can get it in a Treasury edition, which is awesome. I think that this would have worked better for me because it would have been a little bit more of an original idea. But they've done this before. Whether it was this, whether it was Fantastic Four Unstable Molecules, like there's been other retellings of the Fantastic Four origin story. I just think that, I mean, to Chad's point, like they got some of the relationships wrong. They got some of the relationships right. Like I really did like the Reed-Sue dynamic through this. I thought that was actually fairly dynamic throughout. And eventually, as they get older and they've seen, you know, their lives pass and their kids have grown, they reconnect as a couple, which was nice. I actually like the fact that Franklin got to grow up. He's married to a Wakandan hottie and he has nice kids. And I thought that was all cool. But like I had a real problem with Reed and Ben. And that's like, for me, that's like the heart of the Fantastic Four is the Reed and Ben relationship. So the moment, like from the first issue, and they weren't pals to start with, I was like, I think this is not going in the right direction. And it didn't get better from there. They took too long to introduce Doctor Doom. He's not even until issue 2. And I think it was a missed opportunity to chat.
Plus you saw Doctor Doom's face the whole time. What's up with that?
How screwed up was that? I don't want to be a purist. I'm not saying you can't do things original with the Fantastic Four, but this wasn't really even that original. It was like pretty much eventually the same thing. Like that was a great thing issue, by the way. The 90s were the things like, hey, I'm into internet dating and stuff. I was like, that's cute. I like that. But that was like nothing that you wouldn't see in a traditional Fantastic Four book. I mean, you want to see something that's truly different, go read Fantastic Four Unstable Molecules. That they don't even have powers in. 2.5 decades. Well, one thing that we hope lasts through all of the decades to come is our recommendations. Yes, we're hoping, like, I don't know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people are coming back to The Last Comic Shop and saying, those were still really good books that The Last Comic Shop introduced me to on their show. So we'll start off this week with J.A. Scott. What are you recommending this week, Jay?
Well, my recommendation is a comic book that has lasted through the decades, has held up, is still great, and by this time, it's been collected in various forms, so you can find it out there in lots of different ways, and that is the original Coming of Galactus story from the Fantastic Four, issues 48, 49, and 50. You can get it in an epic collection called The Coming of Galactus, which combines issues 33 through 51. So if you get that one, you also get the This Man, This Monster, which they alluded to in the Fantastic Four book we just read, where Thing turns into a human and this guy takes over the Thing powers to try to kill Reed, and then decides that he's not going to kill Reed because Reed's a good guy and ends up saving him. Or if you have a Comixology account, you can get Marvel Masterworks 5, has issues 41 through 50, so you get all the Coming of Galactus issues in that as well. The Epic Collection, I think, still has the original coloring, so I would say if you can find that, it's probably better. But again, you get these original stories, the original Coming of Galactus in Silver Surfer, as told by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. 100% more action, 100% less exposition, and sort of the golden age of the Fantastic Four. You know, I think Kirby and Lee had really worked out how the group interacted, sort of their dynamics with each other, with the world around them. And it was one of the first times where the Fantastic Four really became sort of what the Avengers are in the MCU now. This world defending superhero group that doesn't just take on these little things like Mole Man here or that, but has to fight big cosmic battles.
Yeah. Plus, in some of those issues, you get the first appearances of the Inhumans. So for those folks that want to see really good Inhumans, you should go check out the original stuff that was in that Fantastic Four run. But speaking of Jack Kirby and awesome comic books, I'll go next with my recommendation, and that is the original 8-issue run of OMAC. And again, it's one of those series is like a lot of great Jack Kirby stories that kind of gets to a certain issue and it just ends. Like Devil Dinosaur gets to some issue and then just ends all of a sudden. New Gods just ends all of a sudden. OMAC is no different. It ran for 8 issues, and it was really an idea that started off with the notion of what would happen if you set Captain America into the future. It was something that Kirby wanted to do at Marvel, but he never realized, so he decided to do it at DC when he had a chance. And really, OMAC's this guy named Buddy Blank who teams up with a satellite in space that gives him superhuman powers to help the Global Peace Agency defeat threats that in the 70s might have seemed like science fiction, but it is stuff we are dealing with now. If you want to read a story in which, like in the first issue, OMAC breaks up a sex robot ring, which is just like what you see nowadays with these guys buying these like living sex dolls that they get married to and all this other stuff. That's all it is. Second issue, he's like a millionaire, takes over a town and sets up the Purge. It's kind of weird. And then by issue 5, you have criminal syndicate that's kidnapping young people to basically take their brains out of and put old people's brains in them instead. So it's like basically human trafficking. And it's drawn by Jack Kirby in kind of an intense style. And you have people in bondage and like they've got numbers and foreheads and people are like, I'll take him for $10,000. And you're like, my gosh, this is written in 1974, but like it was ahead of its time. And so if you have an opportunity, he's got a sweet mohawk and an awesome name. One Man Army Corps. That's OMAC. And so, yeah, you should go and read that. Brother Eye is watching.
I will say OMAC has been on my list for a long time. I really have to make sure I check that out. But for me, I'm going to go with something just a little bit more modern. It's actually a mini-series that is currently on the shelves. It is The Thing in The Next Big Thing by Walter Mosley, Tom Riley, and Jordi Belair. And what you have instead of life story that was wrapped up in each of the different decades, instead you get this timeless story of The Thing, where he and Alicia at one point in the story early on decide they're going to take a break. It's classic Ben Grimm, though, and he's off exploring the world. He has this new baddie named Mott, who is this weird demon-looking thing who does the Indiana Jones bit where he pulls a guy's heart out and shows it to him. The art style in the book is super, almost Chris Somney-esque. It's from that Alex Toth school. Very classic, clean style of illustration. But the miniseries so far has been tons of fun. As of the time we're recording this, we're 4 issues in. We've seen Thing go up against Hercules. We've seen Thing get a new girlfriend. We've seen Thing in big boxing matches and going up against the champion of the universe. 4 has this really cool collage cover to it, and it's just all these different experiences. If you like Ben Grimm, if you enjoy the thing that makes the thing, I think this book really gets to the heart of that, and it's been just tons of fun. Ultimately, it's going to be a 6-issue miniseries. I encourage you guys to head out to your local comic shops and check it out.
Yes. And we hope that you come back to the Last Comic Shop every single week for more of our awesome comic book reviews. And you can do that by rate, reviewing, and subscribing to any of that myriad of podcasting platforms that you can find us on every single week. And if you want a list of them, you can just go out to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. We've got an entire list and awesome, cool graphics that you can just click on and take you right there, as well as our link to YouTube. Make sure that you're checking out our YouTube regularly. Not only are all of our podcast episodes available on that platform, but also we've got bonus videos, reviews we do with independent creators that are doing, projects through Kickstarter or what have you. Sometimes we do unboxings of action figures and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, check us out. www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
And if you want to continue the conversation, you can also seek us out on the social medias, where on Twitter and Instagram, we're at Last Comic Shop, where you can find our weekly polls. You can find daily comic book factoids and classic comic covers to tuck you in at night. And you could also find whatever it is we feel like talking about. If you need that, you can always head to our website where they can also find what, J.A.?
Oh, we've got a link to our merch store where you can get T-shirts, sweatshirts, coffee mugs, tote bags. If you are like me, maybe you get a T-shirt and then you keep it for about a decade, and after about 10 or 15 years, it's got that really nice, soft quality of having been washed right before it disintegrates.
Yeah, J.A. he's famous for hanging on to T-shirts well too long after most people would throw them away, and that's when they get that sweet spot. So
they don't last very long in that sweet spot, but when they get there, oh baby.
And while we might be the last comic shop podcast, we don't actually want to be the last comic shop. So we encourage everybody to head out to comic shops near you. If you need help with that, use the comic shop locator at www.comicshoplocator.com. Or maybe you want to pick up today's book about Fantastic Four life story. Maybe you want to go for that epic collection, The Coming of Galactus, with that great Stan and Jack Fantastic Four stuff, which that whole run, man, once they get going, and they don't stop for 100 issues. But and then there's OMAC, also by Jack Kirby. Or maybe you want to pick up The Next Big Thing by Walter Mosley and Tom Riley. All of that and more waits for you at your local comic shop.
And again, we'll be back here at the Last Comic Shop waiting for you next week. Until then, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith. And until next time, stay safe, stay sheltered, and remember, when you kill off your Human Torch in a Fantastic Four life story comic, you should really replace him with a robot that has like a weird face.
Hello, Benjamin. I am Herbie the Robot.
What the hell was that? Who thought that was... I don't care that they didn't have rights. It was a terrible idea. Oh, is there anybody that likes Herbie?
Yeah, I mean, he's a great car.
It's quite the love bug.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2022 Black Angus production.